Alrighty. So here I have Craftofexile, because today it's going to be all about crafting. Specifically, it's going to be about how to craft items that you suggest. Which of course means that right now I don't have a specific item in mind. Instead, I'm gonna need some suggestions. Although I'm sure I'm gonna have to let people trickle in a little bit, and it'll take a couple minutes. But yes, today is all going to be about crafting various items, crafting techniques, and how all of that works. I'm going to be using Craftofexile. Since I don't know what sort of items people are going to be asking for, I have absolutely no idea. Therefore, I couldn't prepare anything ahead of time in-game. And welcome, Snow. So I guess since you're here first, are there any items that you've wondered how to craft? Because if there are, today is the video for that. I'm going to be basically making anything, well, anything that it's reasonable to craft that anyone is interested in. Crafting PTSD? Why do you have crafting PTSD? Crafting's awesome. The better question is, now that there's a few people in here, is there any sort of item that you've always been curious how to make? If so, what is it? Tornado Shot Trinity Bow. All right. There's a few ways to do that, but let's go with the very expensive. So create new item, two-handed weapon, bow. And we want a good base. I don't think you can end up getting something like a solarine with all the right stats on it, because I don't think you can get item level 86 solarines. So instead, we're going to be looking for something a little bit more in the mid-tier of it has good, well-rounded stats, but it's not necessarily too extreme. So an okay base would be something like a Marikath bow. A really cheap and easy to get base would be something like an Imperial bow. Something with pretty good damage ranges for Fizz is Spine bow, but we don't really care about the Fizz, so we don't want to use a Spine bow. And of course, ideally you'd want something like a Thicket or a Grove bow. Thicket is a little bit harder to color, but if you're making something like this, coloring isn't going to be a problem. And so you're saying minion +3 there. I'm not quite sure what you mean. Minion +3 is a helmet mod, not a wand mod. The other thing that you want to do here, which I completely forget how to do on Craftofexile, so this is going to take a minute. Oh, because I'm in dark mode, it's breaking, isn't it? All right, dark mode off. There we go. Oof, that is very rough. So I'm trying to remember how you fracture items on Craftofexile. You know what? I'm just going to cheat. Because the ideal here is that you'd want a fractured +2 arrows. That's the ideal. So to start off with, we do this, and... oh, go away. We do this. That's actually decent. But all right. So now we've got bow attacks fire 2 additional arrows. Oh no. Oh, perfect. Thank you. I forgot that that's all it is now. I did, and I was immediately disappointed by it. All right, so here we've got our base. The reason you want this is this mod is basically impossible to hit while you're trying to craft other good stuff on your bow. So to start off with, you'd want bow attacks fire 2 additional arrows as a fractured mod. This is insane if you're using something like Tornado Shot, and the original question was Tornado Shot. Next up, we're going to go to essences. The reason we're going to go to essences is they're a really good way to roll your prefixes. And you specifically want something like Essence of Anger. It doesn't actually matter which one of these you use in terms of things like anger or hatred. You just want one of the essences. The reason we're doing essences here is outside of ROG, this is going to reliably get you the best rolls on an item like this. ROG is overall much, much better. But already you can see that it's not going to be just use a couple of items and call it good. There's going to be a lot of variance and a lot of rolls that are absolutely god-awful. Because when you're making a 100 plus X item, as it turns out, it's that cost because it's not easy to do. This at least takes care of one prefix though. And so now I'm just looking for other good prefixes without all the garbage. There's going to be a lot with garbage. I don't remember exactly the odds, but I feel like it's a couple 100 essences on average. A couple 100 essences sounds vaguely correct. Here we go. We've got T3 lightning damage. For something like this, if you wanted, you could actually take a very fun gamble. Ideally, yes, you'd want another tier 1 colder lightning, but I'm going to stop him at T3 just for the sake of demonstration. And so now there are, again, several options. One of which is you can just craft something here and call it okay. On a fractured bow, you'd absolutely not want to do that. But I'm going to pretend, just for the sake of demonstration, that we also hit something good here. That we also hit T1 cold damage. So this is a really GG bow that we've magically hit off of our essences. What do you do next? Next, you go to suffixes, and you go to, all right, bench modifiers. Here we go. Here, because we want to metacraft it. So now prefixes cannot be changed. This way, none of these good mods will change. And now we hit it with a Veiled Chaos, and then you'd unveil it. You want crit chance and attributes, which I forget if you can unveil here. I think you can. Oh no, it's Ashling. Yeah, I forget. I've never actually tried to unveil on here. But you'd unveil it. If you don't get what you want, you'd repeat the process, and you'd get a pretty good bow. The more cost-efficient way to do this is through ROG. Unveil under the picture. I'm clicking on the Veiled mod. Oh, down here. There we go. See, this is the problem with me not actually using this. All right, chance to deal double damage. I don't think you want this, because I'm pretty sure you want crit chance. If you can get away with no crit chance, this is really good. If you can't get away with no crit chance, you just redo it again, and fail again, and redo it again. And there we go. Now we have crit chance with strength int. And then you just craft on attack speed and call it good. Like so. Reforge, Crit Harvest, will not give you the strength and int, which is pretty valuable. Or I guess I should say the strength or int, since only one of these counts. It doesn't double dip for Omni. But you don't really need the slight higher crit chance. So it's better to do it with a Veiled Chaos and not use Reforged Crit. Reforged Crit would be if you wanted to get crit multi. Also, I'm not sure if blocking matters for suffixes here. I'm trying to think of a mod. I guess you could craft one of the weird things like damage per charge, and that should block it. I guess? I forget exactly if that really matters, because sometimes it won't pick things anyway. It's weird. I haven't experimented enough with that. Now, someone was asking about, what was it? So the Minion Wand is something that you hit with fossils. I'm not going to go over that here because I've already covered that in a previous How to Craft video. That was the last crafting video that I made where I talked about fossils, and you can find it on my channel. A Hunter chest with +1 curse and attack crit, though, that I will do. So create new item. Body armor. Let's say it's an astral plate. I'm not sure, because on the one hand, I thought it was going to get nerfed, but on the other hand, Beck seems to be saying on Reddit that it isn't getting nerfed, so I don't know. I'm going to pretend it has just a bunch of garbage mods on it. The first thing we want to do is we want to do Reforge Crit, because there are only a couple of attack mods that are all suffixes. There are only a couple of crit mods. So if you do Reforge Crit, if you have it, as you can see right here, Hunter T1 attack crit. We'll redo it. This time it's spell crit. We'll redo it. Spell crit. Spell crit if you have attack crit instead. Here we go. Attack crit. Attack crit. Attack crit. It'll always be attack crit. If you have attack crit, you should use it. If you don't have attack crit, I'm saying attack crit instead of attack reforge. My bad. Let's go back a little bit. If you have attack reforge, you should use it for this because it'll always hit the mod you want. If you don't have it, then use reforge crit. Both are incredibly common. The point is you use reforges until you get the suffixes that you want, such as these suffixes, because these suffixes are honestly really, really good. You've got additional phys reduction, you've got a res, and you've got crit. So this I'm going to keep. And now we go to the oldie bench. Now, we're not awakening for something like this. This is not the sort of craft where you want to awaken it. Well, hopefully you'll learn something today, because that is kind of a point. And wait, I want prefixes. And I want bench. Suffixes cannot be changed. Oh, wait. No, that was me just clicking. There we go. For an item like this, no, elevating the crit is not good. You're not going to want an item like this where you elevate crit because it's going to cost way too much. Remember, this is an item being crafted for someone with a budget. If they said, how do I make the best possible chest piece for 100x? Then we might start talking about elevating crit. But you never want to just elevate something like the crit strike chance. You'd want to elevate the crit strike chance, elevate a second mod, slam them together, and then fix the prefixes, which is a much more expensive and much more involved process. Wait, why do you want additional curse for Spectral Helix? I'm very confused now. I don't think you'd want additional curse on an early chest for Spectral Helix. But yeah, you use the reforges, and then suffixes cannot be changed, and you go to Reforged Caster, and there you go. It's done. This one's amazing. This came out really, really, really good. I guess if you get this chest piece, you absolutely want it. But in general, I would actually say that you don't want this as an early Spectral Helix chest. The reason I say you don't want this as an early Spectral Helix chest is it shouldn't be that hard to get Brittle in your build. Yeah, it's very simple. And this is an amazing outcome. This is way better than you can expect. Just to show you, I'm going to undo and redo. This is more likely. You're probably just going to have to craft life on it. You are correct, Divine. This is what you should expect for an outcome, but sometimes it's amazing. However, that said, I don't think that's what you want for an early Spectral Helix chest. That works on any attack build. The reason I don't think you want that for a Spectral Helix chest, Spectral Helix has one very big problem, and that problem is mana. So, here's what I think you should go for instead. I think you should go for a Warlord chest, and you should use an attack reforge for socketed attacks, have plus 15 to total mana cost. And then what I would do at that point is I would Awakener Orbit with a Hunter chest for +1 curse if you really want, or a Hunter chest for attack crit. That way, you don't have to worry about the mana cost on your Spectral Helix. You don't have to worry about minus mana cost on rings. You can probably still use Inspiration. It's still very, very, very effective. And you can make up the damage elsewhere by not having to worry about all those problems. So that's how I do it. And I think that'll feel a lot better to play, even if on paper the damage isn't necessarily as high. Spectral Helix already does all the damage. And so a helmet for RF Inquisitor with increased AoE burning damage and LE damage. I talked about that in my RF Inquisitor build showcase. But yes, it is just using Essence of Horror. You just click Essences of Horror until you get it on an appropriate base. No, you can't just grab some Mana Leech because Spectral Helix costs an absurd amount for an attack. Unfortunately, it's very, very hard to solve mana early on with Spectral Helix. Best way to scale Smite. Aura stacking. And what were the other questions? There's another item that I wanted to... There's an item that I wanted to make that was a good suggestion. Where was it? All right. The Magic Find Items crafting. So out of curiosity, what did you mean by Magic Find Item crafting? Because I think, if I had to guess, I know what you mean, that you're talking about a helmet, and it's a very unusual craft, so I wanted to talk about it. If not, let me know what you mean by Magic Find Items, because a lot of Magic Find Items are uniques. Frenzy Additional Strike Gloves, there's no real crafting process for that a lot of the time. You just buy +1 Frenzy Gloves and you buy additional strikes, unless I'm remembering my influences wrong. Let me just check on that quickly for my own sanity. Maybe I'm remembering wrong and maybe they're the same, but I thought one was Warlord and one was Hunter with that. Gloves. Yeah. That's just you awaken or orb together a Warlord and a Hunter item. All right, the helmet. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's an interesting question. So, the helmet, I'm just going to say that it's a dex base. I'm going to say it's a line pelt since it's going to be hard to use anything else. So to start with, you will want to spam some alterations. There's a little bit of variance here. I'm not 100%. Oh, wait. I went too fast. Oh, that's tier 4. I'm not 100% sure what the item that you want is. I'm assuming it's rarity, though, with crafted. So that's what I'm basing it off of. And I'm also assuming that it's a magic item rather than a rare one. So I'm going to be honest. Yes, craft. I am looking for crafts to be suggested. No, you cannot craft pierce boots with elemental damage. Yeah, so this is the sort of thing where I wouldn't necessarily set out to craft it. But if I hit it, I would definitely put it up for sale. Because this is really, really, really good. I don't think it's usable for this, simply because you want to keep your item magic so that you can use the aesthetic. If you don't keep your item magic, then it's a little bit of a problem. Yeah, you do lose out on the crafted mod there. Then again, it's so much suppress. Maybe you just use this as is. Maybe you just say, hey, I hit something really good. I already went over an elemental bow divine, so you'll have to go back and watch the VOD version. Or alternatively, use rug, because rug is way better than the method that I talked about. But let's just pretend you keep spamming. Here we go. Well, you definitely just use this one as is. Double rarity. In theory, what we're looking for is an open affix and high tier rarity so that you can then craft rarity in the other slot. But if you just keep hitting really good items, then you just use the really good items that you hit. Yeah. So this is how you'd make a magic find helmet. It's mostly just alt spamming and going slow enough because you won't have an undo button when you're doing it for real, and being open to possibilities, because some of these are very good. In theory, Apothecary's gloves are a good base for poisonous concoction. In practice, only if you can't put Eldritch Implicits on your gloves. Yeah, all this luck's being used up before league start. And I still haven't hit what I wanted, which was just the mod by itself, funnily enough. I haven't just hit rarity or something that I couldn't... there we go. Here's where we'd annul. Well, more accurately, you'd imprint a null, but I'm not going to imprint here because that's extra clicks and I have an undo button. So like, let's say you got this, you'd imprint the item, which means you have a save state, and then you annul, and you hit exactly what you want, and then you just craft on the rarity. Like this. Sentinels won't be able to auto loot. And there you go. So let's see. So KeyX, I suggest that you go to PoEDB and you look at what the items can actually roll. Because right now it feels like you're just suggesting random stuff, most of which can't actually exist. And while I appreciate the suggestions, I do want it to be something that can actually exist. So leaving it as a magic item is important because we are talking about a magic find build, and we're specifically assuming that the build is going to be using an ascetic amulet, which requires that you have a normal item and a magic item equipped. So we don't want to make this into a rare. The helmet is just a very good slot to sacrifice to that magic item. Skeleton helmet. All right, so restart, create new item, and it's definitely going to be an item level 100. I should have mentioned this, and I completely forgot to with the MF item. You'd want to look up what the item level of your mods are, because I don't know if you need a super high item level. And it might be better to use a lower item. Yeah, so tier 1 rarity in both cases on a helmet probably isn't that high item level. All right, I'm just going to check PoEDB quickly. So let's just say helmet dex. No, with my smite suggestion, I meant stacking a bunch of auras on a scion, because you asked about the best way to scale smite. So here we go. Rarity of items found 62, and rarity of items found 75. So you'd want as close to a level 75 helmet as possible, not a level 100. A level 100 means there's a bunch of extra mods that you can roll that you don't want. Like here we've got 80,000 and 42,000. And if I set it to 75, now we're down to 39 and 67. So it's significantly more likely to roll anything from the pool. And that's going to go over there for now. Now we're going to do the minion helmet, which is, I think it's a strength int base for bone helmet. Yes, it is. Perfect. This we do want high item level because we need it to be 86 plus. And it needs to be Shaper and Elder. So, from here, the first thing to do is Essence of Horror. I'm assuming this is skeleton mages and not melee skeletons. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming it's skeleton mages. And now we're looking for +3 minion gems. This is probably going to take a while. Oh, here we go. We've got minion damage and hypothermia. Those are all really good mods. Those are all really good. The only problem is it doesn't have plus minion gems. You could, however, use a beastcraft. The actual beastcraft to use is a slam on an influenced item, but I'm not going to use that because it's not here. So instead, I'm just going to normal slam it and hit garbage. If this hit +3 minion gems, very unlikely. But if it hit +3 minion gems, you just win the game right there. And you go, okay, I'm done. For now, though, we're going to go back and we're going to keep rolling. Because if you want a pretty decent item, this is the best way to do it. Since you're guaranteed a pseudo link. Increased area of effect, conk, elemental damage, still no minion gems. So I know what to start with because I know what items can roll. The best way to do kind of figuring that out is to go to pewdb/mods and just look at everything that can appear on the item. I'm glad I got support for glyphic fossils. I don't think glyphic fossils are the answer here. Here we go. Here's another decent one. There's a lot that I see rolling here that are decent, but not good. And I think it's very unlikely that we're going to hit the +3 minion gems, since that is a pretty rare mod. I wonder if something like Glyphic Faceted would work for hitting minion gems specifically. It gives it to the socketed gem. That's why it says socketed gems are supported by. But even this is still a 6-link for your skeletons. It's not ideal, but it's a 6-link. And that's why we're using these, because it guarantees a link on it. So there's a lot of really okay options, even if this isn't necessarily the best. All right, here we go. Here we go. I don't think it would at all be worth doing this. But in theory, if you have too much money and you just want to set it on fire, you could always do Aug Influence now. You definitely want to block a prefix. That was, whoops. Armor, sure. There we go. Aug Influence. And it hit spell block. Total waste of money. But in theory, you could. And so, I don't know if the goal was specifically a GG Skeleton Mage helmet. If it was, my honest suggestion is don't plan to get a GG Skeleton Mage helmet, because the expense for that is usually higher than the helmet actually sells for. Yes, to get something that's absolutely GG is absurdly expensive, which is why I'm doing it this way. And I'm talking about all of the, it's okay. Like, here we go. Here's another one. It's not perfect, but it's okay. If you got this, it would be usable and you'd be happy with it. Or potentially happy with it. Another one that is potentially usable. There's lots of really, really usable combinations using Essence of Horror. But also as a note, look at the cost that has been racked up by me spamming these horrors. Part of it was the AUG influence. If I take that away, that probably reduces it a lot, but it gets very, very expensive. All right, on to something else. I'm going to skip the 7-link Blizzard Crown helmet for Ice Nova. 1, because that's a bad build and you shouldn't play it. And also 2, the real reason, it basically works exactly the same way that I just did. Bound Fossils for +3 and minion damage is another way to do it. I think that's a way to kind of fish for a better item rather than make something that's at least usable. So the Skeleton Mage helmet for 5 to 10x is exactly what I just did. Cyclone weapon, what kind of cyclone weapon? Because when I think cyclone weapon, I think Paradoxica. But I'm guessing that's not what you mean. Yeah. FB is what in this case? Because I'm thinking Frostblades. Cyclone Bleed isn't a thing. Cyclone Bleed is not a thing. I can't tell. This is the point where I can't tell if chat is trolling me or asking for suggestions. If you are playing Cyclone Bleed, please don't. Okay, Forbidden Right. FR. So, Forbidden Right helmet. Don't you just use Crown of the Inward Eye? If you're not using Crown of the Inward Eye, I'm guessing we're going with a +1 power charge and -12 chaos helmet on a Hubris circlet. So that's pretty simple because you get your item and it'll be Hubris circlet. It'll either be, actually, is it a Hubris circlet though? Because I really like using a Praetor crown for the extra armor. So I'm going to say it's a Praetor crown. And it's Hunter Warlord. And then we would Awakener Orbit together and hope it rolls well, basically. After you rolled the -9 or -12, and after you rolled the... Where is it? Oh, wait, no, that's the suffix. It always throws me that you can't just scroll for prefixes and suffixes. Maximum power charge. Yeah, that's basically all you can do there. There aren't too many fancy crafting things you can do to manipulate it because you're Awakener orbiting together a prefix and a suffix. You can do a lot more if you're Awakener orbiting together 2 prefixes or 2 suffixes. It would, yes. Although, if you're playing Cast on Crit Forbidden Right, I would suggest a +1 power charge Crown of the Inward Eye instead. Crown of the Inward Eye is very hard to beat for the value that it gives. That even something like an elevated helmet needs to roll well to beat a Crown of the Inward Eye. There's not really a good budget version of Tornado Shot because Tornado Shot is a skill that is very bad until you get a high budget. And the 2-handed Flesh Ripper idea, I like that one. So I'm going to do that. There's also a lot of different ways to make a Flesh Ripper that's decent. So let's get into it. Uninfluenced high item level. So one of the very simple ways to make a Flesh Ripper that's decent is to start with a fractured item. So let's just say that you have, this is cheating, mind you. I am going to be cheating here. Oh, right. I always forget that you have to actually make it rare first to put mods on it. So if you want the super easy mode, this is super easy mode. Generally speaking, you can't remove something like the plus 50 evasion unless all of the bad mods are within one affix. So if it has plus 50 evasion and let's say 20% increased evasion, but all the suffixes are good, yes, you can. You can use suffixes cannot be changed and fix it that way. But if it's something like it has plus 50 evasion and 13% fire res, and then it has T1 life and T1 spell suppression, no, you can't. Because at that point, there's no way to target things. Your only option is to use an annul and hope that you hit. So if you want to cheat, if you want to do the super easy Flesh Ripper, the super easy Flesh Rippers, you start with a fractured base, you go over to Essence of Zeal for attack speed, and you hit it. And if it's something bad, like this, you just hit it again, because your one really good mod won't change. So here we go. This is bad. This is bad. You go through on a few of them until you get something you're happy with. Let's just pretend we're happy with this. Yes, this is the most expensive option, but it's also the easiest to start with. And this is how you do super easy mode crafting. But let's say you can't afford this expensive base, which is a very likely chance. Fractured bases tend to be expensive. Yeah, but it wasn't a good crit mod. That's why I rolled by it. No, it would not be easier to do the Fizz Essence and hope for the attack speed roll, because the crafted attack speed that you have access to is much worse than the crafted Fizz that you have access to. So if you look at the bench, and, oh, suffixes, here we go. Benchcraft, suffix, attack speed. You only get 16 to 20 for a crafted suffix of attack speed versus the 28 to 30% on the essence. Whereas for Flat Fizz, you get 24 to 42 as opposed to the essences 42 to 75, which will have overall a lesser impact because of the base damage on a two-handed weapon. But now let's go back and undo all this, because that was the easy but expensive way to do it. Now, what if you're really, really broke? Oh, because usually those are absurdly expensive. For no other reason than to do a hybrid Fizz fracture would cost you 80 to 90x, and at that point you're crafting a perfect item. Unless prices have changed since I last checked, which is entirely possible. But yes, you could do that if you have unlimited money. That weapon works with any axe-compatible two-handed build, so probably something like Earthshatter with crit. Yes. No, you don't. What? No, you don't hit it with an Alkengo mapping. No. So there's a couple ways to do it. First of all, if you have Harvest Crafts. If you have Harvest Crafts, you'd want to try to throw your Harvest Crafts at it first. This is relatively unlikely to hit here. Relatively unlikely to hit off of the Harvest Craft. But if you have them, they're very cheap and reasonably effective. Just spamming a few of them here. I'm just watching this number. Oh, here we go. See, we hit a usable item just spamming a few Harvest Crafts. It's not good, but if you're broke and it's the start of a league and you just found a 6-link Flesh Ripper, you now have a weapon. And you'd put T2 physical damage on it. Reason you don't put T1 is this costs an exalt. This weapon's not worth an exalt. This is not a good weapon, but it's a good start. A slightly more expensive thing to do would be... I'm trying to remember the combo. I think it's Jagged Dense. I think it's Jagged Dense. That gives you a decent shot at blocking some of the less desirable prefixes. It might just be pure Jagged, though. This is also a not really a good way to get an item, but a good way to get a start of an item. If you wanted to get the good item, you'd have to use, where is it? Corroded. Here we go. I believe we still want to block life mods to prevent life leech. This is significantly more expensive. Corroded fossils are not cheap, but the goal is to get good hybrid and good flat. I wonder if you could use something like this, because there's another option as well, which you could throw at it, which is reforge more likely. Oh, right. That's attack tagged. That's unfortunate. The problem with random things that are attack tagged is while you can get some nice stuff like this, it's also going to clutter it with junk mods like that. But if you have something like speed, crit, and a couple of fizz mods on it, it's not the worst thing to do. Again, mostly if you're SSF, mostly early league. Now, all of these aside, what about you're in a trade league, you have some money, you want something pretty decent, it doesn't have to be perfect. In that case, I would go with alt spamming, because the goal here, perfect, exactly what you want. You want a decent prefix, and then you want a decent suffix, and then you regal it. Ideally here you'd have wanted hybrid and not the fizz. And if this had hit something good, you could multi-mod it. If it doesn't hit something good, you just craft your fizz damage and you're good. But let's go back and use the power of the undo button to see what happens when we hit hybrid and can do something similar. There we go. And you'd maybe want to imprint regal this because you're going to want to annul some garbage off. Or not, or you'll hit something potentially really usable. And then it's gone. I'm going to pretend that the accuracy works for you. This would not be the best weapon ever. This would be a good weapon potentially. Because now you put bench prefixes. Oh wait, I have to do the multi-mod first because I think it's going to yell at me. I can't cheat like I do in POB and just assume that it's multi-modded. Wait. No, better idea. I just got a better idea. Because this is relatively low risk. If you want to be tricky, you do prefixes cannot be changed. And you hit it with a Veiled Chaos. Because it's very unlikely to roll complete junk. 13% chance to deal double damage? There we go. There we go. Unfortunately, this means you can't get flat, which is actually really bad. But oh well, that's the problem that you take with the gamble. So Reforge Plus is largely worthless. In theory, if you get a Reforge Plus, you can use it. But it's really not very helpful because of the way reforging works. Reforging, especially when you're locking affixes, just isn't worth it for how rare Reforge Plus is. So basically what I'm trying to say is, let's say you had a Reforge Plus. I wouldn't say Well, don't use this. No, obviously use it. It's going to have slightly better outcomes. But you're probably going to get 1 of these and 6 of these. So realistically, you're going to be using these. And it's not worth discarding all of these and just chasing this. Yeah, that sounds about right. Things can be very rare. Changing cast on crit Ice Nova to Forbidden Right cast on crit sounds like a very good plan. Yeah, it's basically just another Reforge, which, when you think about it, is okay, but isn't amazing. I don't have a video specifically for res life ring crafting, because in general, you shouldn't try to craft a res life ring, you should buy it. It's very rare that you will be able to make a res life ring for less than it costs to just buy the item in a trade league. How do you know if a mob can deal chaos damage? Because you got one shot with 20 to 25k armor, and you know it's not fizz damage, but you have 12% chaos res, and you can tell that a mob will deal elemental damage, but not chaos. So I'm not sure what you mean by that, because most mobs that deal chaos damage have a green effect on their attacks, much like how you'll see the colored effects for elemental damage. It's why our Kali's everything is purple, because it's Voltaxic, which is a combination of lightning and chaos. But with 25k armor, it is entirely possible, if you are not crit immune, that you got one shot to fizz damage, especially if you don't have a large life pool. Also, it's entirely possible that you got killed to something like Fizz's Extra. Yes, that's why the ethereal knives that the Weaver throws have that little green, like almost poisony aura, or why Tora's attacks are all green, because they deal chaos damage. Best way to get accuracy for a Zerker that would use a two-handed axe. Are there any good accuracy crafts that you can do? So accuracy, there are a couple of ways to cheese it. One would be on gloves, if you're specifically forcing a suffix, but in general, I don't think this is a good idea. I'm just going to demonstrate it for how this works. Cursed Crypt Boss. Yes, Fizz's Extra is a map mod. If you put it on the enemies that you fight, they can and will use it to destroy you. So let's just say you have these gloves and you wanted to put accuracy on it. One way that you could force accuracy, which again, I'm not advising this. I'll explain what I do advise after, but I just want to show for how this works. You'd metacraft for 2 exalts, and this is why I don't advise it. Wait, no, that's prefixes. Yeah, no, prefixes cannot be changed. Oh, suffix is full. Come on, give me an open suffix. There we go. So yeah, you do that. And then you'd go over to harvest. And you'd... Oh, well, the prefixes have to be full. So let's try that again. Yes, you can force accuracy with metacraft, is my point. It'll either hit accuracy or attack speed. This is not the way to do it, though. The real way to do it, the correct way to do it, is to use ROG. Because ROG tends to bias towards things like accuracy on rings due to the level requirement and due to the number of tiers on the item. So go over to ROG and roll your gloves and your rings with ROG. It's a very good way to get accuracy on both. This is the how you can do it if you really want, more as a demonstration of this works. It's not a good idea. All right, see you later. And yes, pay attention to the look of mobs. Also get your chaos res to 75%. See, you've been making a Sweep Slayer work. Sweep has never been in the meta, and Sweep has never been good because it has really weird innate mechanical flaws. It is the thing that people always want to be good that is not actually good. So it's not out of a meta only because it was never in the meta. Yeah, I don't actually advise doing the Reforge on a helmet. And the reason I don't advise doing Reforge on a helmet is you really want something better than accuracy on your helmet. Yes, the Eater of Worlds mod on gloves, which, can you put that on? Oh, yes, you can. Cool. This is another really good way to get a lot of stuff like suppression and accuracy. You wouldn't want to do that normally with spiked gloves. Kind of ruins the point, but it's fine. Herald of Thunder auto bomber weapon. So my understanding was that Herald of Thunder auto bombers were using the annihilating light. What are you looking for on the item? Oh, nice snow. Because if someone says, you know, they want to see how a RF helmet works, it's very easy for me to tell from the description what sort of mods the item wants. I'm not sure what sort of mods a Herald of Thunder auto bomber would want, because most of the things that I can think of for it would be either a unique like Nebulous or a weapon like Annihilating Light. I can't really think of, off the top of my head, a standardized way to categorize the mods on a rare, if that makes sense. I doubt they did anything because I didn't see any patch notes about it. That sounds like bad luck from a small sample size. Unless, just to make sure, always double check to see if you are influencing, because there have definitely been times where I've left the Maven's Beacon on by accident and I'm like, why am I getting no altars? What's going on? I realized it's because I had the Maven Beacon on. Weapon for Ellie Trap Sabo. What sort of weapon are we talking about there? Again, try to be as specific as possible for what you want on the item, because there's a lot of different ways to make something like that. I mean, the unique's so cheap that you just use whatever you have from the floor for that. The Annihilating Light's thing like 7C, and Nebulous is 2C, even pretty early. I guess maybe like 10C early. Problem with Nebulous is the gear to go with the Nebulous. But also, I wouldn't advise playing Herald of Thunder before you have those things. Yes, RF helmet. You craft it with the Essence of Horror. And yes, it is, generally speaking, just essence spam. Elemental damage dagger. By that, do you mean for attacks? Or do you mean elemental damage as in spellcaster? You shouldn't build RF to be your primary damage. Okay, so I'm going to create a new item here for a attack elemental damage. So I know you said dagger, but I'd like to point out here that this process is the same for claw or dagger. If you're using a dagger, though, you do have to be careful to make sure you use the right base type. Whereas with a claw, kind of the only base types available are all attack-based. Daggers, you have regular, and you have rune. You would not want to use any of these. But let's say it's a dagger. What's the best dagger base here? I don't actually know. It's been so long since I've played any build that used daggers because they're kind of atrocious. I guess it's the Ambusher. I think the Ambusher is correct. What? Tailwind boots? You hate me. Everyone always asks for that. But no, I'll go over this quickly first, and then I might do Tailwind boots. We'll see. Build question. Playing Nightblade, Poison, Crit, Spectral Helix. And the guide anoints Wither effect. Why not something like Chaos damage, since mobs can be hexproof? Going to be using pneumatic, that does very much matter, because you probably can't do what I was about to suggest with a pneumatic dagger. So I'll get into that in a minute. First, Withered effect does not have anything to do with mobs being hexproof. Wither is not a curse, it's a debuff. So, something like that is always going to add damage. Withered's effect is enemies taking increased damage. It multiplies with increases to the damage that you deal. Whereas increased chaos damage would be additive with the damage you deal. So it's far more effective to scale your Wither. All right, I'm going to restart here. And Dagger. The reason that this is important is the original method I was going to go with was using a fractured base, because a fractured base costs 50 or 60x and is much, much cheaper than you would otherwise be able to make. But if we can't use a fractured base and we can't use ROG, I'm not sure it's even worth using a pneumatic dagger, to be honest. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to reliably, without spending a fortune, get more, because I think you still use the flat essences. I haven't experimented with this much. This is just going to be me guessing without having done the craft before. I'm not liking what's rolling here. No, it can't go above level 83, but I don't believe that matters here, because I'm pretty sure there are no dagger mods that are above anyway. Huh. I wonder if instead of doing the suffixes, you'd start from this and try to fracture. I wonder if you'd do this and then fracture 3 to try to hit the fractured suffix. Oh, is there no craft for that? God damn it, Craftofexile. I can't simulate money spending. In general, I don't really advise doing this. What you're going to end up with is a build that's far more expensive than scaling fizz-based poison, and that feels a lot worse than scaling Ellie-based stuff. If you're going to do this, I do think that the essences are the way to go, and that you probably want to either fracture a prefix, which should get absurdly expensive, for a flat essence of, let's just say, something like this, and then you'd roll for a second flat essence, just like you would for a normal Ellie Claw, or you roll Zeal and you fracture the suffix and you roll like that. That's the best way I can think of to do this without getting into too much detail, because I don't think this is a very practical craft. I really would not advise playing a build around this. Yeah, it's weird what they did to ritual bases. But I don't really know where I stand on that, because on the one hand, getting them above would be nice. But on the other hand, they're very powerful, and it's a good way to balance them by making it so they can't roll certain modifiers. Although you can get around that. Fun fact. You can get around that. Let's see if I can. So let's just say I have a helmet that's a penitent mask. It's item level 83. And I can't put a -9 on it, normally. It's not here in the pool. But what I could do is I could roll, let's just say, crit multi, and I could elevate it, and then I could Awakener Orb a -9 onto the helmet, because Awakener Orb ignores item level requirements. So there is a way to get those powerful mods on using an Awakener's Orb. But if I were then to scour the item, it all goes away. That's something that works really well, is really interesting, and adds a lot of crafting options while not just being a generic power boost. Now, that said, it does feel kind of bad that these can't go to level 85 anymore. So I wouldn't necessarily be against something that increases their level. I don't know that an orb to increase item level is a good solution. My concern about an orb to increase item level is that seems very abusable in the case of fractured items. Though I guess if it couldn't be used on influenced items, that would be okay. Because then you could raise the high spaces, you could raise your penitent mask, you couldn't raise your fractured +1 frenzy charge ring. Or your fractured onslaught boots. Or not fractured, synthesized, sorry. Fractured items would also be a problem with that. So I could see that being a potential option, but I think I would rather Uber Ritual and Uber Heist. Are wand scepters always better to craft on than rune daggers? Pretty much yes. The problem with a rune dagger is, in general, you will get more value from an increase to damage than you will from an increase to crit chance. The increase to crit chance is usually pretty minimal. It does depend a little bit on the skill you're using, but in general, if we're talking about something like a scepter, it also has overall a better mod pool, which, let's go back to our good friend over at PewDB for a minute to just kind of demonstrate this. So let's just say that we've got a scepter here as opposed to a rune dagger. So rune dagger in that tab, scepter in this tab. So the scepter has 89,000 and 129,000 total weights, and also has a lot of extra mods like dot multi, which can be very effective for rolling something that's sellable, but not necessarily perfect. Rune Dagger, on the other hand, easier to roll the suffixes, but a lot of the suffixes aren't as good. Things like chance to poison on hit, you're not going to be using that as a spellcaster. So that's a dead mod. Prefixes, on the other hand, are harder to roll effectively. And so, better implicit on a scepter and a wand, especially in the case of something like, let's just say, Herald of Thunder. Not that I can think you're going crit Herald of Thunder, you're probably crit Lightning Trap or crit Spark. But if you were, the LE damage increase on a scepter is a lot better. When is volleying worth it? Unfortunately, that question is determined by the market. Volleying is worth it when the odds of the item's value increasing exceeds the odds of the item's value decreasing. Yeah, that used to be a reason to do it. Unfortunately, that reason is no longer in existence. And I do like the Strength Stacker Amulet, but I'm also apparently losing my voice from talking a little bit too much. So I'm going to go get something to drink, and then I'll be back to talk about how to craft a Strength Stacking Amulet, because that's an interesting craft, and it's a little bit different from what I've done so far. And just for fun, am I going to put it on an Astrolabe or Simplex? I kind of want to put it on a Simplex Amulet, because those are fun. But I'll be back in one moment. And I totally forgot to add a BRB screen to this scene. So we're just going to get really jank text of BRB. All right, I'm back. Something else that should be noted here. While I'm talking about crafting and various methods, one very important part about crafting in general is to be willing to test things and willing to do things over and over and over again until you get it right. Because you can start off with a relatively simple process that works okay, and you can refine it from there. Of course I did. It's right next to you, Maka. But most of these things I'm going over here are either crafts I know and I've done a lot of times, or my best educated guess as to how the craft would work. Which is why this is a little bit different from my videos, where I will often spend the hours to research and make sure that it is actually the best possible method rather than just a good method. Such as when I was making the weapon earlier and I went through 4 different methods, there's obviously a best there. The best will probably change a little bit depending on what the cost of things are. But did I take the BRB off? Yes, I did. Cool. But being able to do this on the fly relies heavily on things I've made before. And I'm just looking up. See, here's the problem with strength stacking amulets. It's so rare for me to make one of these that I don't remember which 2 influences I'm supposed to simulate here. I know there's 2 influences that I want because I believe you'd start by Awakener orbing 2 things together. But I actually forget which ones they are. It's percent strength, percent attributes. So percent attributes is a shaper suffix. And percent strength is a warlord suffix. Oh, I should pull this over here. Yes, it looks like it is shaper and warlord. I'm just double checking to make sure there's not a second alternative with a higher weighting or a lower weighting on something. Because one unfortunate problem here is this gives damage per dex, damage per int, which will make the final item harder to roll. All right. Yes, it is Shaper Warlord. Gonna make it rare, remove all the mods. Can I catalyze this? There's so many things on Craftofexile that are good for the sake of demonstration that I just don't ever do because I don't care what I'm crafting for myself. And now I have to remember which one, right, intrinsic is the attributes. All right, already at maximum value, cool. And now, suffixes, increased, oh, right. I was trying to add increased strength. Let's see, you've got T2 hybrid, chosen fizz plus poison, T3 flat. What you do to finish? Just multi-mod? Yes, you should just multi-mod at that point. And that'll get you a very solid item. Where is attribute? There we go. So here's our amulet base. And this is where things get painful. This is going to be a craft that is going to hurt some people's souls. Oh, right. I keep forgetting that I'm not applying this thing. I'm just really bad at navigating this UI. So this is going to hurt people's souls because how you make a really good strength stacking amulet that's like perfect is you do a simplex. You awakener orb together. Most likely you would have used for Warlord because I believe that's fine. And oh god, I closed my PewDB. Yeah, the UI is strange. And things aren't in the places I expect. And then you metacraft and you repeat the Reforge influence until you get the prefix that you want. This is why these amulets are worth well over 100 exalts, by the way. Because they are super, super, super expensive to make. There are, of course, simpler ones. The simpler one is you just awakener orb. But I figured that you just awakener orb is a pretty boring crafting explanation. So instead, we're doing the absolutely absurd. And it's even worse for strength. Strength is the worst one. Strength is so expensive. This is why when I played a strength stacking build, I didn't use a rare amulet because I looked at it and I went, a rare amulet is technically slightly better than a Rigwald's, but it's also like 1,000 times more expensive. So I'm just not going to do it. So I think the big thing for the UI here that is really confusing to me is it's not unified. So what I mean by it's not unified is things aren't where I would expect them to be, and you don't interact with them in the same ways across different elements of the UI. Like up here, I'm selecting all the different currencies, and then I click on the item to apply it. In the mods, I click this little plus thing, but my first instinct was actually to click on the mod itself. And then because I have to click on this and then click to apply, in my head, I click on this and then click to apply, but that doesn't work. The second part might just be me though. I would definitely, instead of having to click the little plus over here, it would make a lot more sense to me to just click on the thing itself. Also for fracturing, having the little symbol here is very easy to miss when everything else is just a big symbol up top. I always look for the fracture symbol up here. And so there's a lot of little elements like that where it doesn't feel unified. And I think that's why it's so confusing to navigate. Part of it, like when I click here and then go to click here, could also easily just be me though. Yeah, not that we're successfully making this amulet, because it's very hard to do. It's very, 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 very expensive. Oh, nice. Glad to have you here. I kind of guessed from your question that you had something to do with a project. I didn't know you were the creator, but that's awesome. And just to say, I'm sorry if it came off as me being very harsh. I do overall like Craftofexile a lot. I just also run into some frustrations when I'm trying to navigate it and when I'm trying to use it, where there's certain things that don't work the way I'd expect them to. Okay, another perfect example of based on just other pieces of software that I've used and other things that I've run into that it works, but it's a little bit janky, is this right here. The undo button is great. I love the undo button, but sometimes I want to undo a bunch of steps and there's no way to do that. I kind of expected to be able to click here and it would jump all the way back to the step that I want to undo until, rather than having to keep hitting the button. That said, I do love the undo button. The undo button is great. It makes things so much easier, especially when demonstrating crafts. And I would love to be able to jump back multiple steps. What? Don't ask him to name every craft. No, that's so mean. Sure, absolutely. Although that said, if there's anyone here who also has some suggestions, rather than bombarding Emil here, and I apologize if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but rather than bombarding here, let me know in my Discord so that I can kind of summarize some community thoughts as well. And for anyone who is not part of my Discord, it is down in my description. You can just hop in, and then in the Pewee general chat or whatever, if you have any frustrations that you've had with Craftofexile or suggestions, then just put them there and I'll go over them and I'll summarize them for later. Because this is a very, very good tool. It is super helpful. Gotcha. I'm also in the TFT Discord, so I will find you that way. What do you, of course you're in, God damn it, Divine. I'm also in the TFT Discord under the same name as I use for everything else. And let's see, bleed bow. Bleed bow. Oh, how do you make a bleed bow these days? That's an interesting one. That's one of those I haven't thought about it in a really long time. So this is going to, again, be a learning experience for all of us. And we want a Citadel bow. I believe Citadel is still the best possible base. I don't know if you want to down level it or anything. I'm going to pretend that you don't. I don't know that you need attacks of a chance to cause bleeding on hit. Oh, wait, isn't that... That's Tora's mod, isn't it? Okay, never mind. I'm in the wrong thing. Our Exarch mods... No, it would not be spine. So, wait, I'm just going to restart to do this. So, two-handed weapons, bow. So, if you look at the spine base, it's 45 to 138 with 1.4 attacks per second. The thing about this is it attacks faster than a Citadel, which is good if you're hitting, but because bleed, typically you only hit once with your puncture, you want to hit as hard as possible, mostly without regard to the speed. So you use the Citadel base, which has significantly higher base damage at 43 to 172. Lower DPS, higher damage. And I don't think you use an Elder Bow. I think you use a Hunter Bow. But I also think you use a Hunter Bow in a specific way. And I'm going to pull up QEDB here to check that, because I don't know if you're supposed to have it on before or after. So there's a neat trick you can do. Let's see. Increased Fizz Pierce. So that's a hybrid mod. Okay, Hunter is chaos damage over time. Never mind. Warlord is what you want. Nope, Harbinger Bow is, again, not good for bleed. Bleed does not scale off of crit. So to start with, you'd want, and here's the thing, I think you'd probably want to, in the real world, buy a decent bow. You'd want to buy a bow that already has some flat fizz and already has some increased fizz. I'm going to pretend, though, that you're doing it from scratch and that you're probably going to do it via Veiled Chaos. Veiled Chaos sounds about right since it's 2 exalts. Though that could be more expensive than you need, because I can't imagine a decent bleed bow is that expensive in the current meta, as people are going to be rolling these for hits, and then they're going to be like, oh, you know, I hit increased physical damage. Oh, that reminds me of another small thing that I could be doing wrong that always throws me a little bit when crafting on here. So I always assume that I'm just going to be able to add mods to the item without having to make it magic or whatever. That could just be a me thing, but I'd kind of like the option to be able to have it automatically go magic or rare as you add mods in the beginning for the sake of demonstrations and stuff. Wait, no, not scour. Yeah, so let's just say you have a T2 increased fizz and it has, where's flat? Here we go. T2 flat. So this is your starting weapon. The best suffix. So those would be good, but we're not going to worry about the suffixes yet. We're going to pretend that the bow has junk suffixes, because suffixes don't actually matter right now. What matters is you would want a base with 1 open prefix and 2 good prefixes. This is what's important. And so instead of going completely from scratch, I'm going to pretend this is your starting point. What you do is you go to your benchcraft and you use cannot roll attack modifiers. This is going to greatly restrict the pool. So if you do non-attack, this is why I like PoEDB, by the way. It is very good for visually demonstrating a lot of this stuff with mod pools. I could also be doing it on Craftofexile via the calculator. I just personally like PoEDB for this because of getting things to appear and disappear. But yeah, this is the only normal attack modifier, and this is the only warlord one. And this is where things get really interesting. This is why we wanted to start with an uninfluenced base, because you can go to Warlord Exalt and slam it. And now you get increased physical damage over time. This will be the only modifier that the Warlord's Exalt can slam on the item. So you now have a bow with increased physical damage over time. Physical damage, physical damage. It probably won't be quite as good as a high tier hybrid roll, but it will be much, much, much cheaper because this costs you an exalt, and these tend to run about half an exalt. And getting something with the hybrid roll on it that someone considers valuable for like cold conversion ice shot, probably 5 times the price. Now what we do is we go back and we do prefixes cannot be changed because we want to get rid of the Metacraft, swap it to a new one for 2x, and we Veiled Chaos because there's a lot of good suffixes here. I think I have to select, but I shouldn't have done that. This is one you definitely block. Unselect non-attack, go to bow suffixes. What is the highest weight? It's probably going to be the charged ones. I kind of hate the charged ones. Yeah, it's the charged ones. Of course it is. Okay, so damage per charge we want to get rid of from our mod pool, like so. Wait, weren't you the one who asked for this, Divine? I think you were the one who asked for this. I could be wrong. I could be remembering wrong. But anyway. Oh, not you. Oh, yeah. So this time it was a miss. Let's try again. Attack speed's not great. There aren't very many great options here, I might add. This is the it gets expensive part, and you might want to just craft dot multi and call it good. But if you have more money, if the market is pretty decent for it, unveiling like this a few times. Oh look, trigger socketed spell. Definitely what we want. We definitely want to trigger socketed spells. Funnily enough, I could see this being a valid choice. I could see putting a bunch of spells in here. In terms of the unveiling portion, yes. In terms of how it applies the mod to the item, no. Let's see. Trigger Blood Rage. Yay. This is the part that I would not advise doing, by the way. Because we're fishing for one specific mod in a pool that is very diluted. Actually, am I remembering wrong? Can it even roll on bows? I could have sworn... Yes. Fizz damage over time multiplier can roll on bows. It's just a 400 weighting out of 14,500. There we go. So this is the part that you can do, but absolutely shouldn't. And there we go. We've got chaos damage multiplier. It's a dot multi. We've won. I'm kidding. This is not what you want. All right. Now that I've demonstrated things that you can but probably shouldn't do, the much more realistic answer of what you probably should do here, you probably want to aim for a little bit more quality of life with Harvest. So you'd go for something like a Reforged Speed. We got Projectile Speed. I would call that close enough, honestly. Really, this is just wiping out bad suffixes. You could even say, you know what, I don't want to do this, and just straight up scour. Wipe out all your bad suffixes. This is the best option, by the way. I'm just being greedy because usually when I craft in a very greedy manner because I have the money to. Don't do what I do. Do this, scour it. I know it's scary, but it has all those good mods to scour it. Just remember, as long as you have prefixes cannot be changed, you can scour the item once and it won't touch the prefixes because they cannot be changed. And then from here, the safe thing to do is multi-mod and put on Fizz dot, and then put on whatever you want for the last thing, probably attack speed, because attack speed feels pretty good here. You obviously don't want to do something like double damage. That doesn't actually matter. You could do attack speed Blood Rage. Personally, I don't like Blood Rage just on my weapon. If it's on my weapon, I can't take it off if I'm doing lab or something. So you do something like this and you have a pretty reasonable, pretty darn good Fizz dot bow. Technically speaking, this is not explicitly bleed. You wouldn't really want to use it with Corrupting Fever because these mods don't help. But overall, pretty good. Fun fact. Funny you ask about Beastcrafts, because there's a Beastcraft which is not here at the moment, but may come in the future, that says add a mod to an influenced item. And that is very helpful if you do actually want to make something like a Corrupting Fever bow. So let's say you're doing I'm just going to say Grove bow. I'm going to say Warlord influence. And I'm going to say that you've already rolled all the stuff that you want on it. Or not all, but a lot of the stuff that you want. You'd want to roll it for T1.multi. For your suffix, and then ideally attack speed. So this would just be Alt-Dog Regal or a null down from something good. And there we go. We've got a really fast attacking bow for Corrupting Fever. The best way to make something that is pretty good and on the fairly easy to craft side, not quite perfect, not quite the best thing you can make, but pretty good, is a very similar method. Cannot roll attack. And then, watch this. This is where the magic happens. And you can use a beast for this. It is called the Krakic Maw. The Krakic Maw will add a modifier to an influenced item. It will not add an influence modifier by default. It'll be anything the item can roll. But remember, this bow can only roll 2 modifiers. +1 gems, and Fizz Dot. Just like that. If I do it again, no matter how many times I do this, it will always only roll increased physical damage over time and +1 socketed gems. Because those are the only 2 modifiers on the item. If I click again, it can't add another mod. There's no other prefix it can add. So from here, you just remove the craft, like so. If you wanted to be really fancy, you could ashling. I wouldn't really advise ashling at this point. That seems needlessly greedy, even beyond what I would consider worth it. +2. You can do the same thing with Leo, yes. It's just that in general, it's a lot easier to buy 2 Krakic Maws than it is to go through doing Leo. And yeah, there you go. You've got a Corrupting Fever bow. This exact thing works for Toxic Rain as well. You just want Hunter influence. Because if we come back over here to bows, we do non-attack. Increased chaos damage over time is the only modifier that a Hunter prefix bow can roll, aside of +1 gems. Increased fizz damage over time. The only thing. You can't make a +1 cold added cold damage to spells amulet. So if we go to the mod pool here, amulets. There's no cold to spells. There's no added damage to spells at all available on amulets. Basic int stacker wand. Buy it. You don't want to try to craft something like a basic int stacker wand. It will always cost too much because other people are going to be playing int stackers and you're going to want to buy something they're no longer using. How can you tell if it can craft a specific thing? That is by understanding how tags work. So this is why I like using PoEDB. These are all tags. Specifically with the attack tag, you can put cannot roll caster mods or cannot roll attack mods as a meta craft. Right now, the item could roll everything in here. If you do cannot roll caster, now it can roll everything in here. If you do cannot roll attack, now it can roll everything in here. And that's how you'd know. Basically looking it up. Fingerless gloves for Spark. I have no idea what Spark would want in terms of fingerless gloves. What sort of mods are you looking for? Because what I think of would be that it's mostly just Eldritch implicits, and then you want life and yes. So +2 chaos amulet. How do you go further beyond and get both chaos and damage multi on it? By hating yourself. Jokes aside, I can demonstrate quickly what you do to get at least one of those. So we go to jewelry, we go to amulet, we go to a random base amulet, and we do not want it to be influenced. So let's just pretend that you have something real nice here with T1 life. Wait, that's crafted. Something actually really nice. Well, I'm glad you've got step 1 down. So you've got this. And I'm just going to pretend it has junk suffixes right now because the suffixes don't matter, but I want to demonstrate this anyway. So what do you do when you have an item with really good prefixes and really, really bad suffixes? You go to Ye Olde Harvest and you do Reforge, keeping prefixes. And now all of a sudden we have open suffixes for metacrafting, because unfortunately you will not be able to get damage over time multiplier unless you started from an amulet that had it on it reliably. It's just way too low odds. So if you crafted all of this on a fractured base, that's how you'd get the damage over time multiplier. Chaos damage over time multiplier, on the other hand, that's a lot easier to do. So I'm going to focus on that. And to start with, maybe just hit it. Did not just hit it. So we go to Ye Olde Benchcraft. Prefixes cannot be changed. To Harvest. And there you go. It is not a 100% chance, by the way. You can also hit Chaos Res, but it's pretty common. There's, I'd like to say, 5 tiers of Chaos Res and 2 tiers of dot multi that are all Chaos tagged. Wait, I can highlight this specifically. Oh, there's 6 tiers and 2 tiers. I was very close. Yes, it's just that easy. It is very, very easy to get 1 dot multi. It's roughly a 25% chance that you will get a dot multi of some sort on any given craft. So an average cost of about 8x. And if you get to a state like this, you just do Reforge keeping prefixes again. Or you'd keep it because honestly, this is a really good amulet. I don't know how many people play Chaos dot spells right now, but that's really good. That's potentially you keep it and sell it good. Although the cold damage is very unfortunate. Yeah. And the problem with getting the regular dot multi alongside Chaos dot multi is the regular dot multi doesn't have any tags. So it's really, really bad to roll. And the fractured thing can get you the +1/+1 with dot multi, but it can't get you the Chaos dot because fracture is incompatible with Hunter. If I were to make an endgame cold dot amulet, would it be a similar process? No, because I'd be wearing Ashes of the Stars. I don't think you can actually get a rare that beats Presence of Chiyula or Ashes of the Stars for cold dot. You certainly can't for less than completely absurd investment. Okay. Faster proj, faster casting, crit multi. So let's go back to POED mods, gloves, int. So faster casting is a speed tagged suffix. Then crit multi is that Elder or is that Shaper? That's attacks have crit multi. Ah, spells have crit multi. Lightning Ignite is sort of still a thing. So these are both gem tagged though. So I think I know what we're gonna do here. Create new item, gloves, gloves int, fingerless silk gloves. And you need Elder for the faster projectiles, yes. Elder, Shaper, Proceed. Harvest would be the better way, but it really depends on what you want on them. It could also be better to just buy them and not try to craft them yourself. One very big mistake that I see a lot of people make with crafting projects is trying to craft something themselves that they can easily buy for less than it costs to make. So I suspect that what you want to do here is you want to use, wait, what were our tags again? Speed, caster. So you want to use a shuddering fossil. Do you want to use a, what's it called? Faceted. I think you want to use faceted. Because now we have more speed, which means this is going to be more likely. And this is going to be more likely. But it also means saying like this is going to be more likely. So we also want to add Aetheric. And so now we have more caster, more speed, more gem. So we're encouraging this specifically. This, but we're also discouraging it, so it's okay. These. Wait, why Essence of Hysteria? Oh, more attack and cast speed. I don't think that's why you make something like this. Not unless you have a truly unlimited budget. Because to make something like this with an Essence of Hysteria is going to be completely absurd. I do not think essences are the answer here. I don't think horror is the answer either. I think what we want now is one more blocker of some sort. What were the tags on this? Oh, it's only attack speed gem. I was really hoping for a physical tag because that would eliminate that. Could eliminate that with blocking Fizz. Could eliminate that with blocking Chaos. That would also block this. Not that that's particularly encouraged. Let's just see how this goes. Nope. That's still really good. It's not what we want, but it's still really good. That's just silly. As you can see, the faster projectiles and faster casting are coming up a lot. Oh, I wonder if we go deft for more crit. That could be the answer. Slower proj, faster proj, advanced trap, faster casting. That is a mess, but someone would probably buy that. I don't think the advanced trap is useful, but slower and faster proj and faster casting. Here we go. Faster proj, faster casting, crit multi. Not a good tier of any of them, but I do think this is the right fossil combo for hitting this as reliably as possibly. Maybe not as cheaply as possible, though. Because there is another way to do this. The other way to do this, I believe, works. One second, let me just check quickly. Yeah, okay, speed. Crit. Yes. So the other way to do this, which might be cheaper, would be to start by reforging crit. Have a good night, Divine. Flame Blast needs a miracle to feel good. So you'd reforge crit because that forces crit multi. And you would do this a bunch of times until you hit faster casting. Unfortunately, because we're now not differentiating between attack and spell crit, it might take a bit. But Reforged Crit tends to be really cheap, so this is probably the more cost-efficient way to do it. There we go. Socketed spells have 50% crit multi, faster casting. And then what we do is we go to our mod pool, or no, we go to our benchcraft for a prefix. Suffixes cannot be changed. And then we do Reforged Speed, because there's only one speed mod. And we now have a very usable pair of gloves. I know this is only T2, but I'm going to be honest, having that 60 dex is going to help your build a lot more than having a little bit more crit multi. So this is the way that you would make that more cheaply and more deterministically without necessarily getting the best possible item. It might even be better than the fossil method. I'd have to do both in the calculator to see the odds, or maybe even plug both into the simulator to know which is best here. My gut says that this one is better if you have a lot of time and not much money. And the fossils are better if you have a lot of money and not much time. Because usually, better is a little bit tricky, because there are crafts that are very time efficient, and there are crafts that are very money efficient. And most players seem to assume that it is always better to go with the money efficient craft. The problem with that is time spent crafting can also be time spent not making money if the other outcomes are not profitable. So it can actually be better sometimes to spend more money crafting and less time crafting to get the results you want, so you can go back to farming and making more currency. On the other hand, something like Harvest, I feel like enough results would be profitable from other harvest crafts you're getting that despite the time inefficiency, it is worth it to go for this method. That is just my gut instinct without having tested most of these in detail. And this, by the way, is exactly how, when I'm making a new item, I will do it. I'll just try stuff. I'll be like, fossils seem like a good place to start, so let's go with fossils. And then I go, this is costing a lot of money and not rolling well. What about harvest? And I'll go through that process of elimination until I find something that hits that nice balance of the cost to make the item and also the time to make the item. Got to mix the two. Got to balance it. This is also part of why hopefully this is more helpful than just a video on how to craft specific things, because you're able to see my process in real time. You're able to see me make mistakes. You're able to see me figure things out. You're also able to see me use PoEDB, because if you just want to quickly fact check while you're doing this, really good way to do it. Oh, look, these are the crit mods. This is what can possibly roll if I guarantee a crit mod. The reason I went for Reforged Crit instead of Reforged Caster is because this is what can roll if you guarantee a caster mod. But caster could also work. Realistically, if you were making these for yourself, you wouldn't only be using your crits. It's just easier to click crit, 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 crit than to go, crit, crit. All right, now I'm going to use my casters, caster, 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 caster. Realistically, you would be using both as you get them. And sometimes you'd hit a bunch of garbage. You'd hit a lot of a bunch of garbage. But eventually, you'd hit what you want. And then you can go back and... Where was the finished item? There we go. You go back, and then you always finish it with speed. Because, again, this is the only mod that can roll here. This is another one of those, no matter how many times I do it, it will always roll this. Sometimes, unfortunately, it'll roll like that. But you'll notice most of the time, it'll leave open prefixes. I wonder if that's good or bad. I'm not sure. I can't tell if the Mana Leech here is good or if the Mana Leech is bad. What does Mana Leech support do again? It's been so long since I used this gem. Oh, it's bad. It's a dead mod. Got it. I forgot that it was attack only. So instead you'd want something like this. And then you'd probably craft life. Or technically, if you want to get really fancy, actually, I have a better idea. So let's say you have this. When you say good bases, do you mean good bases like an item level of something? Or do you mean good bases like this item has 3 mods on it and I can metacraft it from there? Because if you're talking about our, item level 84 fingerless silk gloves, a good base, the trade macro is the best way to do it. If you're talking about is an item with crit multi and faster casting a good base, then that's really just a matter of researching for yourself based on PoE Ninja and PoEDB. PoEDB to learn what the item can roll on it. PoE Ninja to learn who is using that item and what they want on it. But from here, how would you finish these gloves? Well, I think you'd finish them with Ashling, because we get to do a save state. What I mean by a save state is you will never ruin these suffixes with any future step in the crafting. You can only ruin the prefix, but ruining the prefix is okay, because you do suffixes cannot be changed, which is a prefix mod. And then we do Ashling. Like so. And we ruined it. So we'd put faster projectiles back on, and we'd do it again. And it failed again. This is a coin flip, by the way. Sometimes you will get unlucky. Sometimes you'll get very unlucky. There we go. Now, I want to block. I think mana is the best block here. Unveil. Hit it in 1. And now you have really good spark gloves. Yes, it could take 30 tries. It's a coin flip, and sometimes you get tails 30 times in a row. But is it worth it? Well, we got unlucky with the Ashling, and then we got really lucky with the Unveil. Don't expect to hit this in 1. I forget the exact odds. I think it's something like 1 in 6. But that is how you'd make really, really top tier spark gloves. And this is why knowing what mods are on an item are so important to knowing how to craft it. Because you can control for the tags. And when you control for tags, something that seemed impossible to roll is now relatively easy to roll. What I mean by seemed impossible. Now, I'm going to go over here for a minute. And wait. Okay, I'm just clicking without thinking. Let's do the thing that we actually want to do here instead of just clicking without thinking. That might be a good idea. So Shaper and Elder. Approximate budget. The base is probably going to cost you... I'm just going to say the base, counting the Awakener Orb, is going to be 6x. No, that's high. Last I checked, Awakener Orbs are only 1x this league, not the 3 or 4 I'm used to. So let's say 3x. The base is going to be 3x. The crafting costs to do, let's just say, all the harvest stuff, 2-3 hours. Can't really put a monetary value on that. All you're spending is your time. So whatever you value 2 to 3 hours of your time. Then the reforge speed, assuming you want at least T2, I'm going to say 4x. It's going to take you 2 tries. I think it's slightly better than that, but I'm going to say 4. Then for the Ashling, I'm also going to say it will take you at least 2 tries to hit Ashling and at least 3 successful Ashlings. So now you multiply previous costs. So to get to the point where you ashling is 4x, which means it's 8x to get a successful ashling, which means we're looking at a budget of about 24x to finish the item with +2 gems if you get reasonably lucky. So overall, 20 to 30x, but keep in mind, if you get unlucky, that could easily balloon upwards of 40x, or you just go with the +1 crafted and you don't worry at all about the +2 gems, and we're looking at a much, much cheaper 8x total. Ish. What do you mean fake blood mechanic? But let's say you wanted to roll this with chaos orbs. How bad would it be? It's going to be bad, by the way. This is to demonstrate the power of tag manipulation. It's going to be really horrifying. So take a guess at how many chaos orbs it would take to roll faster proj, faster casting, and spell crit multi. And no cheating if you've been following along. Oh, that. I don't think it's going to get nerfed. I don't think it's... So that's one of those things where it's balanced, but it's not as good relative to a Mage Blood as people might think. We've got everything from, what is that? 99,999,999 to 40,000 at the low end. The answer is, wait, oh. I was like, why is it so low? It was because it was trying to ask either one. But no, it's around, for a 60% confidence, 44,000. Keep in mind, 60% confidence means you're not going to get it very reliably. If you want to get this reliably, you need closer to a 90% confidence. So how much do you have to spend to do this really reliably? Oh, right. I failed at typing that in. More like 100,000 chaos. And keep in mind, I believe it's explained here. Yeah. This shows the chance. I really like that the confidence level is explained. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people don't click this and they misunderstand what this number means, where they just look at this number and they go, oh, I need to spend exactly 43,893 chaos orbs and I will hit this item. That is not how that works. That is not how that works. If you're ever unsure, click this. This shows the chance to hit your desired results within a fixed amount of tries. In other words, 43,893 chaos gives you a 63% chance to hit that item. So I'm just going to talk very quickly about something like a max power charge Blizzard Crown, because that overlaps with something I did before. The way you would do that is you would take a Blizzard Crown and you would, oh wait, that's gloves and not a helmet. So you take the Blizzard Crown. You'd want that to be your Warlord item because it can only be item level 83. You'd put the max power charges on this. Then you'd Awakener Orb over a Redeemer item. And you'd have to just hope that you hit Spell Suppression. Spell Suppression is a tagless mod. There is no way to force it on. You can't use Augments on this item because it's going to be double influenced with a prefix and a suffix. You can't roll it from the base because minus cold requires level 85, which the item will never be. So your only option is you have to hope that you RNG your way into the Spell Suppression. I believe you can craft spell suppression, though. So alternatively, you can hope you RNG your way into the life, and then you just craft spell suppression. That's how you'd make an item like that. It's horrible. It feels bad. You'll have to do it a bunch of times, and you probably won't get what you want. That said, I think it's a relatively fair way to balance the power of something like a Blizzard Crown. So it does make sense to me why you can do that, or why it works the way it does, even if it feels bad to do the crafting. Yes, it's much easier to aim for spell suppression on other parts of your gear, because if you're aiming for it, I'm just going to guess that you're something like Winter Orb with that. But if you're aiming for it on other parts of your gear, it is much, much, much easier. Large cluster for cold damage. Sure. Let me just answer the other question of, is Brass Dome good for low life builds? No, it is not good for low life builds. The reason Brass Dome is not good for low life builds is because chaos damage will be bypassing your energy shield, and you're just going to die. Oh, EK Occultist. That makes sense as well. I cannot craft something for Eye of Winter because that is way too vague. And crafting a large cluster for cold damage, also very vague, but I think I know what you mean. You're talking about a cold lightning conversion cluster? If not, then let me know. But I'm assuming it's a cold lightning conversion cluster. Yeah, crafting, the thing about Path of Exile is crafting gets absolutely wild. There is almost an unlimited top end, but remember, after a point, there's often not a significant difference between a 30x item and a 130x item. The significant difference in terms of character power might be 2 or 3% damage, or 2 or 3% defenses. The cost, though, is 4 times, 5 times, or maybe even 10 times. The keystone that gives... So you're thinking of Chaos Inoculation. Chaos Inoculation does not give you chaos resistance. It makes you immune to chaos damage. There's an important distinction there. For example, if an enemy penetrates chaos resistance, you still take no damage if you have Chaos Inoculation. In that case, if you have enough ES from other things, yes, Brass Dome is a pretty good choice, but you're probably better off using Aegis Aurora. So I would only use Brass Dome if you're using a staff or a bow. What even is a chest for Spellslinger? When I think chest for Spellslinger, I think shavs. Try to keep it specific so that I know what sort of mods the item wants. But back to this jewel for now. The best way to do it is harvest, and the best way to do it is reforge lightning. This goes back to what I was mentioning before about tags. The reason we're reforging lightning on a cold cluster is because we're looking for notables that have the lightning tag. Then I'm going to go over to PoEDB here. And I'm going to specifically go to cluster jewels, which I always lose in this list because my eye is drawn to jewelry and not to jewels. And so we go to cold damage. Here are all of our notables. There's Storm Rider, which is shocked, damage against shocked and chilled enemies. You're probably both shocking and chilling if you're doing a conversion, because most go half and half. If you're doing full conversion, this doesn't help you. But Snowstorm is really, really, really good. And you'll notice there are only 2 lightning tagged notables. So that is what we're trying to hit here. Sometimes you get lightning res, sometimes you get good things like Doriani's Lesson and Deep Chill. But ideally, what we're looking for is something like this, except with the good suffix. And you can check here, because this is one of a few cases where augments still work because it's not an influenced item. That's what I'm assuming. Yes. So you're struggling to get blanketed snow. The penetrates. I wouldn't really aim for blanketed snow. Blanketed snow is really hard to hit. If you're going for blanketed snow specifically, that's going to be a lot harder. I think it's better to aim for Storm Rider because that's targetable. Then for the last one, unfortunately, there aren't any good suffixes here that we can target. Sometimes you get lucky, and sometimes you can do an augment, and it forces a specific suffix. If you really want to go blanketed snow, I think you just go fossil spam. You probably just go frigid, to be honest. But it's not a good way to do it, I will warn you. It is very cost inefficient. Because it's really hard to block things out. I think frigid spam is, if you're super early league and you don't need a 3-notable one. I mean, sometimes you just get stuff like this. That's really good. That's super good. That's probably a 2-3x cluster. Yeah, I prefer targeting the lightning and going from there. And hoping for 3 notables, burning all of your Harvest Reforged Lightnings on it. Because that's relatively cheap. And the thing that I mentioned about augments, a perfect example of this is on the Chaos Damage cluster. So, see how Unholy Grace has attack? If you already have this modifier here, you can aug attack and you will always slam Unholy Grace on. If you aug physical, you will always slam Grim Oath on. So you can force really rare cluster combinations by rolling good prefixes, like say Overwhelming Malice with something else, and then automatically slamming this or this, depending on what else is on the item. Which is a neat thing about cluster jewels that not many people know because it is very expensive, but it can be well worth it. Cluster jewels are fun. You get to do all sorts of crazy stuff with them. Also, if you were wondering, does that mean that I can guarantee Grim Oath on a cluster jewel if it's a chaos cluster and I'm playing a poison build? Yes, because this is a fizz tag. And so, create new item, jewels. Wait, not jewels. Cluster jewels. And now we go to chaos damage. And we do, you guessed it, Reforge Physical. Grim Oath. Grim Oath. Grim Oath. Every single time you're guaranteed to hit Grim Oath because it is the only physical tagged mod on the item. Doesn't matter how many times I do this, Grim Oath will be here 100% of the time. If I do attack, well, now I get the attack and cast speed mod, or I get Unholy Grace. I don't really think even Berserker can use a Rage Gem that well, to be honest. Because the problem with the Rage Gem is it adds relatively little flat damage. And then you need at least 10 rage for this. So it's not really about a class using it well. What uses the Rage Gem well is a weapon like Paradoxica, or maybe Pillar of the Caged God, that has very effective increases to damage, rather than very good base damage. So it's not about what class can use the Rage Gem well. It's about what weapon can use the Rage Gem well. What do you mean emotional damage? That's why you pick crafts that have lots of overlap. That's why you don't try to make weird things. If you try to make weird things, like you try to make a dagger for a meme build that only one person is ever going to use and that person is you run into exactly that problem, where you spend all of your money and you get nothing in return. But if, let's just say you're trying to roll a chaos cluster with Unholy Grace, there's no emotional damage, because I'm using my cheap harvest crafts. I'm playing a poison build, and I'm looking for something good for my poison build. Maybe I don't get anything for a while. Maybe I get something like this. That's not that great. But eventually, it will hit 3 notables. And if you're doing a lot of harvest, you can accelerate this process by quite a bit. Once it does, you'll be asking the question not of, can I use this? But can someone else use this? And if you can't use it, because let's just say you're a poison build and you don't really benefit from Wicked Paw, a Toxic Rain build easily could benefit from Wicked Paw. So all of a sudden, it becomes less about, can I do this? More about, can anyone do this? Yeah. Some of these items, you will get some Reforge Plus. The reason I don't spam it is the majority of what you will be doing is going to be just the regular Reforges. Or did you mean this Reforge more likely? Because as I remember, this Reforge more likely is the opposite of your friend when it comes to notables. It tends to actually break notables. Let's try it a little bit. Yeah, it breaks notables. Look at how quickly it went away from notables, and now it's not going back. So this is definitely not your friend when it comes to notables on here. Yeah, the Reforge Chaos Plus would be the best way to get 3 notables of any kind here. Whereas this, the Reforge Plus, doesn't matter as much because there's only very specific mods that it's encouraging. And the premise here was you're a poison build trying to make something niche and specific, and you just happen to be overlapping with a Toxic Rain build. So when you make something that's not good for you, it would be good for them. Of course, if you use Grim Oath, then it's only really good for poison builds. Yeah. Selling stuff, that's where it really does go back to crafting things that other people want rather than just crafting things that only you want. Because if you're making things that only you want, it'll be very hard to sell it. But let's just say I was making a bow that I wanted that also happened to overlap with Ignite Explosive Arrow on League Start. Let's say I was making a Burning Arrow bow, or to use a more realistic example, an Ellie hit bow. And I hit a Fire Dot multi-suffix off of a Veiled Chaos. Well, that's not good for Elemental Hit. That's very good for Explosive Arrow. Now, I have a massive market to sell to. Yep, no worries. So whenever you aim for something that a lot of people might want, if people want your failed crafts, you'll always be able to sell them. But if you're going for something that nobody wants, then not so good. I think it depends more on if EA Ballista itself gets adjustments. There's a lot of speculation about what is and is not going to be nerfed. I released a video theory crafting some potential nerfs. That's about as far as I'm going to go in terms of that. For now, I'm just going to wait and see what the official announcements are, and then just go from there. Because at this point, it probably doesn't matter that much what's getting nerfed in terms of what I'm doing at League Start. I'll just plan my League Start around something that's not nerfed. So I don't think you'll want to try to get rich with RF chests. RF chests cost a massive amount of money for good ones, just from a base early league. You're going to be spending probably 20-30x just for the base to make a really good RF chest, and another 20x in crafting fees. Or you're going to be spending, if you're really lucky, you're going to be spending like 2 chaos because someone's going to misprice something, and you're going to get a Guadalitsi chest that you can use. But if we're talking about a grasping mail, I don't think that one's a good plan. RF's a good build to target, but I would target gloves and not chests. The reason I target gloves is they also sell for a lot. They're much cheaper to make. Let's just say you have random Crusader gloves. Probably Death Wish, yeah. Something like this. Actually, that overcomplicates things. Let's try that again. Let's try that again without being absurdly greedy. So what you do here is you just use pristine fossils. The goal is to get life regen per second, life regeneration rate. Dex is also good. Super, super cheap craft to make. See, even here, this isn't a great item, but it's kind of usable. I wouldn't advise selling something like that, but you never know, sometimes early league. But as you can see, almost every time I hit the button, there's at least one of the mods that I want. It's just a matter of hitting the right tier, which so far has not been going very well. But also, we've spent 20 chaos. We're not spending a lot of money here, so it doesn't matter if we try a bunch of times. With something expensive, like the chess piece, it matters if you try a bunch of times. Even something like this is relatively good. It's got really good suffixes. You could, in theory, fix this up by doing something like Harvest. Cost about 1 Exalt, Reforge keeping suffixes. Then you do something like Benchcraft. Suffixes can't be changed. Wait. I forgot to click on the right. There we go. Well, that's a bad one. This is where it's problematic. You should probably just craft life and call it good. Yeah, something like this, already really good. Block, mana, unveil, AoE gems. AoE gems are good. Relatively common to hit something good. Doesn't have to be AoE gems, but AoE is very nice for your auras. Put on max life. And now, spam some Eldritch. Physical damage. Nope. This is almost going to be more expensive than making the gloves. Extinguish isn't terrible, but isn't good either. The ideal is fire.multi. I guess if you're going an ignite-based fire trap, in theory, stopping on some of these could be good because they'd be good for other people. Like the ignites, you could sell that to an explosive arrow ballista build. So it sounds to me like some of your crafting in the past has been a bit on the greedy side. Would that be accurate? And here you go. 271 chaos in, and we've made really good RF gloves. I don't know how much these would be worth. Based on how much mine sold for, I wouldn't be shocked if a pair of gloves like this could be 20 plus exalts. I wouldn't set out to necessarily hit this exact thing. There was a fair bit of luck involved in hitting the decks. There's a fair bit of luck involved in hitting the AoE gems. You might want to just craft life instead. But overall, something like this is not that hard to make. Generally a very profitable craft because there's a lot of good outcomes and you're not locked into selling it to an RF build. You can also sell it to an explosive arrow ignite build. You can also sell it to something like a Spark Inquisitor. It's going to be a decent pair of starting gloves for pretty much anyone using Inquisitor regen. So that's pretty neat. And that's a perfect example of what I mean by you don't want to just go for an item that's good for you. You want to go for an item that's good for as many people as possible. But that said, this stream has been a staggering amount of talking. This stream has been way more talking than my normal streams, and more than I was expecting, so I can feel my voice starting to go a little bit. Probably shouldn't have done some recording right before I did this stream. But with that, hopefully everyone's found this informative. Hopefully this has taught you a little bit more about crafting in Path of Exile and my process when I do craft as to what I look for, how I try to make things, and how you're able to decide if something's worth it or not. Yep, I'm glad everyone enjoyed it. Have a good night, and I'll be back streaming sometime soon.